G'day! Today we're going to look at how to tank Vault of the Wardens, and we're doing this on a Blood Death Knight, as you can see. The group that we have here, this is on normal difficulty. It's a level 110 dungeon. There's nothing too terrible in here. The main thing is the last boss. It's very dependent on a specific person knowing what to do, and if that person doesn't know what to do, it really stagnates and can prevent you from actually finishing the fight. There's a couple of bosses in here like that where they're kind of troll friendly. We'll talk about those as we get to them. When you come into the dungeon, you can go left or right. There's no difference between the two. I'm Australian. We drive on the left hand side of the road, so it's just habit for me. But the main thing with these trash packs, the ones that I worry about, they're called the Furies. They're the demons with two swords. They get a buff on them, or rather they debuff you with an ability that kind of looks like the good old rogue mutilate. It's the two crossed swords, and that basically it's kind of like essentially a flurry, so it's a pew pew moment. So having some active mitigation up when you see that debuff appear is quite useful. The boss does something the same. This is a mini boss. Just for this one, there's a couple of things to watch out for. He throws his glaives out, so just make sure you're kind of away from those. And there's a bit of AoE in the ground. It's telegraphed really nicely, so it's just a case of don't stand in it. I do choose to stand in it, mainly because I want to see what the damage is. It's normal, negligible, I didn't even bother getting out of it kind of thing. With the boss that we actually are coming up to a little bit later, that mutilate type ability is called Dark Strikes, and the boss gets it as a buff. So you see the effect on the trash, but it's a debuff on you. On the boss, it's not a debuff on you, it's actually a buff on the boss, but it's the same icon, that kind of thing. So with these belches, vile tongue belches, they're squishy as anything. So I probably shouldn't have used D&D there because it was kind of a waste. This pack here, you have two Furies in there. So you notice I've got the debuff on me now, and they also blink behind you. So it gets a little bit dicey, and certainly on heroic difficulty, it will be important to either have some CC, or not maybe not CC, but to certainly make sure you've got some active mitigation rolling for that debuff with the two of them there. I'd probably prioritize one, if not both of those, get some stuns rolling, that kind of thing, in heroic and higher difficulty. The belches again, very, very squishy. Up the stairs we've got two packs. There's one that's a moving patrol, and then you've got a pack of 4. In the pack of 4, on the left-hand side is a caster, so you do have to either silence or grip them or something like that, depending on what class you are. A ranged silence, that kind of thing, if you don't want to pull them with the patrol, or you can pull the patrol first and then do this pack later. It's normal. My gear was okay, so I opted to tank all of them. Once again, you do have a Fury in there, so the Fury will, as you can see, teleport behind you, so just repositioning for that kind of thing. I guess the main thing with repositioning for the Furies, it depends on what your latency is to the server. So for me personally, I was on the beta, and in Australia, I'm sort of running at maybe 200 plus, sometimes 300 depending on the day. So sometimes server movement is a little bit finicky. So I, strafe and then things move, or they don't move, or they move too much, that kind of thing. But just something to be mindful of. These two here, nothing really to worry about. Getting into the habit of just silencing anything with the cast bar that you can silence pretty much is the way to go. And then we're getting into the first boss. So as mentioned, with, I think it's Tirathon, I'm not entirely sure the pronunciation, but there's a couple of things. We've already talked about the Dark Strikes. So you'll see he'll get that the two blue crossed swords as a buff. And also if you have DBM running, DBM screams at you. So you just need to have some active mitigation. Active mitigation in Legion is a little bit unclear now that they've changed the tooltips. But knowing what your active mitigation is kind of useful. So for a Death Knight, having the right active mitigation up for Dark Strikes, it's different for each class, but if you end up doing Neltharian's Lair, it's also on that last boss you need to know which one is your active mitigation, that kind of thing. So we've seen a couple of abilities now. Dark Strikes, the one that you have to use active mitigation for. Also a bit of ground AoE. Fell Mortar, just step out of that. Furious Blast is another one we have to interrupt. So you or somebody interrupts Furious Blast, and then he takes this metamorphosis form, and this is where we get this dancing mode. So with the chains, you'll see the chains will come towards you, and as a tank you have to make sure that you're moving in the most logical way, so not running around the long way kind of thing, trying to find the shortest path and trying to keep people close to you. It's a little bit dicey. I think people will get used to actually following tanks for this, rather than, as you'll see, standing in the bad and dying. So that was something that, the chance to do a fair bit of damage, but yeah, as long as you avoid them and keep the boss, a fair way away, not too much movement, a bit of a, how much is too much kind of thing. So then we go through and we kill a whole lot of imps, yay for imps, and we see our lovely, lovely foul mother. So this is another mini boss. Basically with this one, you just got to avoid the crap on the ground. Getting the vile imps, I'm just making sure that I'm keeping them off the healer just so it's not, annoying for him. But really for this one, it's camera angles, because you've got a door right behind you. It's quite difficult. I prefer to have, DPS with the best camera angle. It's just the way that I am, so they can see things that are coming, which means that I kind of have to do some crazy things with my camera. Wow, I got some birds going haywire outside my door. Sorry about that. This is nature. This is Australia. Don't ask me what kind of birds they are, but they're bloody noisy. Then we get into a lift. Now, this one, this is where a lot of people die, because if you're a demon hunter, you can jump down and glide to the bottom, but a lot of people see a hole in the ground. They think Neltharian's lair, where you go down, the old Goonies slide, that kind of thing. That's not the case here. So if you see people jump down, don't follow them unless you have a blink or a disengage or a bubble or a glide, some sort of ability where you're not going to go kasplatskis on the bottom. So we're heading down now to the second boss, which is an Inquisitor. And there's not too many things to worry about for him. This is an AoE fight. It can get a little bit dicey depending on the difficulty and your gear, but essentially what he does is there's a cast that you have to interrupt, and then he will teleport and grab some ads. So having AoE ready for those ads is quite useful. You'll notice that I don't with the first because I stuffed up the timing. So when we get to the first pack, I've kind of just got to use my AoE, but I don't have any D&D, so just be mindful if you've got a cooldown on your AoE, it is worth saving it for the teleport, which is happening now. So he goes to a different door, these cages, which you might recognise if you've done the Demon Hunter quests, and then these ads come out, kill the ads, keep the boss interrupted. So what I usually do as a tank is I take care of the interrupts on the boss, or I try to, and then let the DPS focus on the ads. Most of it gets cleaved down pretty nicely anyway. They will continue to teleport, so depending on how slow your DPS is, you might get 2 or maybe 3 doors that open, and each time is a different group of ads. Each ads are a little bit different. Some you'll get used to being the scary ones, and other ones aren't too bad. Again, depends on the difficulty. Apart from this, after this, we head toward another mini-boss. If you've ever done the Arcatraz in good old Burning Crusade, the Mechanar and the Arcatraz and Tempest Keep, Botanica, that kind of area. In the Arcatraz, if you remember, there is a Meteor ability where everybody's got to stack and share the damage. There's exactly the same thing here. The problem with the one that comes up with this mini-boss that's coming up, it has the visual effect of some of the bosses in HFC, where you get out of it kind of thing. So people see something that looks very, very similar to Manaroth, and they instinctively run away from it, but it's actually Meteor, so you're meant to stack and share it. So what I found, it actually happens to me here. And what I ended up doing is I noticed everybody was stepping out of it. So I waited until I saw the cast, until I saw the meteor come down, and actually ran toward people to make them share it with me. You may or may not find that's a problem, but eventually when people get familiar with it and they realize they actually have to share that damage, yeah, you might, I don't know, as a tank, I think on normal difficulty I might have been okay. This is the ability here, so you notice now that the thing is falling down, I actually move toward people to try and share it. I don't know whether you could solo it as a tank on normal, maybe. Earlier on in the beginning of Alpha and Beta, it definitely one-shot people, so I'm not sure if that's going to be what it's like when it goes live. So for this one, Ash Golem, really only 2 things, and you only have to worry about one as a tank. So around the room we've got these countermeasures. So you notice if you rewind a couple of seconds, one of the melee, I think it was one of the demon hunters, ran out there and actually clicked one of these statues around the outside, which gives the boss this debuff, which is called brittle, and you want the boss to be debuffed so you can do more damage to it. So you get that by using the countermeasures, those little statues around the outside of the room. When brittle is not up, you get a lot of AoE in the ground. There's fire, you know, lava reef, that kind of thing, and you get some fishes, you get some ads depending on how long the fight goes for. So it's just a case of avoiding anything orange. All the orange stuff is bad. Use the countermeasures so you stop the boss from producing all these things. This little bit here is a bit of a shortcut. When you go up the stairs, swing a right before you actually exit that little foyer area, and if you follow it around you can skip some of the trash in the middle. At least you can go from boss to boss rather than going boss to trash to boss kind of thing. Glazer. This one is most definitely troll prone to trolling, can we say. There is an ability that he does called Energize, and when he does this, he becomes immune to damage. Essentially immune to damage is a big shell, like what you see with turtles and that kind of thing, a golden shell, and you have to turn mirrors. This is it here. So there's a beam that sort of comes out from his eyeball and it hits a mirror. If you have a look around the room, around the edges of the room, you can see some mirrors. You need to turn the mirrors so that they reflect the beam back onto the boss. So there's 3 in total, at least on normal difficulty. The problem is that once you click them, you can keep clicking them. So a person can actually stand there and just go click, 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 and prevent the boss from actually being hit by the beam, and then you're basically stagnating the entire fight. So if you get one of those unfortunate groups, yeah, you might have to be prepared to be sitting there doing, 10% damage to the boss and eventually killing it that way. But just as a word of warning, you do have to turn the mirrors so that they line up the beam, hit the boss, it removes the shell, and then you can continue to DPS. Apart from that, avoiding obviously all this blue stuff on the ground is a good idea, and that's basically the fight. Our little demon hunter that's dead there, he ran off in some strange direction and decided he wanted to solo some mobs, so I don't know what was going on there. But this little mini boss type thing here, I don't know if they're technically mini bosses, I'm just calling them that, but she doesn't do anything terribly amazing. The ads are worthwhile interrupting. They do like a drain life type ability, so just interrupting those is probably a good idea. After this, with these bosses, it doesn't really matter what order you do them in. I sometimes do them in one way and then I do it a different way, but you're eventually going to end up at the same place. So you do have this mini boss, and then there's another one after that, which doesn't do anything amazing. There's a bit of AoE on the ground. If you've been leveling in Azuna, you'll probably recognize sort of a flaming cage trap type mechanic. It's really just avoid the stuff on the ground pretty much. There's nothing too worrisome. There is an ad that he calls. The ad actually does a fair bit of damage now that I think about it. So prioritizing the ad depending on your gear might be a good idea. Considering this is normal and my gear wasn't too bad, it probably is worthwhile actually prioritizing the ad. But as you can see, staying out of the green stuff. The cage ability is coming up in a second. And there should be... Did we already kill the ad? Or am I thinking of another... I might be thinking of another mini-boss. But there's that cage ability. Oh, I might be thinking of a different mini-boss. Here we have another lift. Don't follow people down the hole if you don't have the glide, disengage, shield, etc, etc, etc. And this is the interesting area. So we're heading toward the last boss. So the first thing that we have to do here is to actually pick up a light. And this light, Elun's light, allows you to attack the trash packs. If you don't have the light, if the light isn't on the trash, you cannot attack it. So usually as a tank, I find it's a good idea to pick it up. Later on there's a second one, and having one on maybe melee is a good idea. Having a melee pick up one and then you pick up the other, or you have this one and the melee gets the second one, kind of thing, is a good idea. But if you have the light, just be mindful that if you run away, you know, that you're chain pulling or something and you're trying to run away, these vengeance spirits, what they call spirit of vengeance, they won't follow you unless you line of sight them. So you might be running away thinking that you're going to chain pull. Meanwhile, the DPS is sitting there and they can't actually kill it because you've run away with the light, kind of thing. So just be a little bit careful of that. The spiders, nothing to worry about. With the spirit of vengeance, your spirits of vengeance, they do one of the boss abilities. This light is the most important boss ability, which we'll talk about a little bit later. With the Spirits of Vengeance, they also do a knockback, which is the other ability. So there's a stun and then a knockback immediately afterwards. So you can't avoid the knockback because you're stunned prior to that. And that is what the boss does as well. So when you're on, there's a platform, and if you get knocked off the platform, you fall down, you do get brought back up, but yeah, it it takes a little bit of time. So you don't want to get knocked off the platform, basically. So positioning yourself so that you get punted across the platform rather than off it is the main thing. The light mechanic this is where it's another sort of potentially trollable area. Here's the other light. One of the demon hunters picks this one up. We just continue around, just follow the path kind of thing, and eventually you'll head toward some big doors, and then we head into the last boss. So while we're doing that, I'm just going to sort of natter for a little bit about the last boss. Cordana it's a pain. I've had a lot of really, really frustrating groups with Cordana, mainly because of people not using Elun's light properly. There's two things that you have to do with the light. So as a tank, I advise not picking up the light for the boss, simply because you have to run around and you have to do two things. You have to clear the ground of, I think it's called creeping darkness. It's like a moss that grows and spreads across the platform, and it spreads pretty darn quickly. So you have to run over it with Elun's light, and it clears that darkness. The other thing is you have to use the light to illuminate the ad. So the ad appears in one corner. You can't see where it is. You've got to run around. There's a little animation that the boss does, which is pretty hard to miss. It's pretty hard to see. It's very easy to miss. And it will indicate where the ad is, and then you're meant to run over there. And when the boss shields herself, you run over there, illuminate the ad, and then the DPS can kill it. But the problem is that as the tank, because you get a stun and a knockback, having to deal with the darkness, the creeping darkness, and then having to get the ad and making sure that you don't get punted off the edge of the platform. Personally, I find like a high mobility class is a good idea, like a hunter, that kind of thing. So the hunter takes it in here and it works really well. Where does the trolling come in? If whoever picks up the light doesn't stand on the moss, doesn't stand on the green stuff, or doesn't illuminate the ad, it becomes a soft enrage. So you have nowhere to stand, basically, and everybody dies. So if you have problems on this, I can almost pretty much guarantee that there's the creeping crap there. So hopefully our little hunter notices running toward it. As he runs towards it, it disappears, and that's the way it kind of has worked. Once again, be careful with the knockback. It is very easy to get punted off the edge. Now the other thing, you'll just notice right now I've got a debuff on me. Not Purgatory, the other one, the yellowy white one. This is the ad here, so you want to actually pick that up as a tank, I should mention as well. Dot all the glaives, that kind of thing. That debuff is really, really difficult to avoid, because what happens is the boss shoots out a glaive, the glaive comes back. Anybody who gets hit by the glaive then takes this debuff, and it decreases the amount of damage that you take. The problem is that you can be on the other side of the boss. If one of the melee gets hit by it, it's an AoE, so everybody in melee range gets hit by it. So this is now where we need to illuminate the ad. This is why I'm getting knocked at the same time, so if you have to run and get that ad, it's kind of scary if you're going to get knocked, get the knockback while you're running toward the ad, if that makes sense. You notice the hunter here stops killing the green crap, so it grows pretty quickly. It grows pretty quickly, which means it's eventually like I said, you've got nowhere to stand. I end up having to punt myself onto the green stuff because for some reason he just decides to avoid it. I don't know whether he's doing it on purpose or he's doing some testing or something, but yeah, it gets pretty squishy. If you rewatch this fight, I'm rambling a lot because, yeah. But if you rewatch this fight, there is an animation that the boss does that indicates where the ad is. There's a tiny little green thing that she shoots out a few seconds before she bubbles. If you watch that in amongst everything else, you can kind of see where to go with the light. But this glaive AoE thing is pretty painful. It's actually, if you watch now, the paladin on the left died because he got hit by that. Yeah, it's quite painful. This is normal. This is pretty normal. This is rough, this fight. So if you have any problems with it, I can understand why. Yeah. But in the meantime, hopefully there was something useful in here. Thank you very much for watching. Enjoy the rest of your morning, day, afternoon, evening, whatever the case may be. Hopefully see you next time.